Happy New Year and welcome to Forum Daily's New Year's special. I'm Nathaniel Dewick, News Director with Forum Daily, and thanks for joining us for a look ahead at 2023. We're highlighting conversations with our anchor Nima Rajan about what to look for in 2023.
The Canadian Taxpayers Federation has released its annual New Year's Tax Changes Report, which highlights the major tax changes for the upcoming new year. CTF is outlining the expected tax increases by the federal and provincial government in 2023. The report covers a range of changes from CPP contributions to carbon pricing to provincial taxes. And with inflation, interest rates, and supply chain concerns continuing to impact Canadians, many households may be interested in any changes to the taxes that they pay. Well, with us now to discuss the 2023 edition of the CTF's New Year's Tax Changes Report is Mr. Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me on.
So from the looks of it, Canadians are in for multiple new tax increases, Mr. Terrazzano. Can you tell us a little bit more about what they can expect next year?
Unfortunately, Canadians are already struggling to afford groceries and gasoline. You have interest rates that are on the rise. But also, the federal government is going to be raising 5 taxes in 2023. The CPP tax is going up. The EI tax is going up. The carbon tax is going up. Alcohol taxes, well, you guessed it, also going up. And the federal government is also imposing a second carbon tax next year through fuel regulations.
Sounds like a lot to expect, Mr. Terrazzano. Now, this report also mentions bracket creep, which occurs when governments don't adjust their tax brackets with inflation. So tell us a little bit more about this and how apparent this is across Canada.
The good news is that most provinces and the federal government do not have bracket creep because they do move brackets with inflation. But unfortunately, you have provinces like Nova Scotia, like Prince Edward Island, that have bracket creep. And with inflation so high, this bracket creep income tax is going to really sting for those taxpayers. So, for example, in Nova Scotia, bracket creep could cost up to $653 in 2023. In Prince Edward Island, bracket creep could cost up to $263 in 2023.
All right, sir. And I want to jump into some of these other tax increases expected across the country, including carbon pricing. We know the CTF has been very vocal around carbon pricing. What's the situation next year when it comes to this?
Well, come April 1, 2023, the carbon tax is going up. Higher gas prices, higher home heating bills. Now, some of Trudeau's politicians claim that families will be better off with this carbon tax and rebate scheme. But come on, I mean, if you think that the carbon tax, the government is going to raise taxes, skim some off the top, and then make everyone better off, well, then we've got some Ocean View property in Regina to sell you. But hold on a second, because the parliamentary budget officer shows that the government's claims have been incorrect. And in fact, in 2023, the carbon tax will cost the average family anywhere between $402 all the way up to $847, even after the rebates.
And on top of that, we know the CTF is highlighting clean fuel regulations as a second carbon tax. So tell us a little bit more about that and how that's going to impact industry and consumers.
So here's how it works. If producers can't meet the government's requirements, they're going to have to pay the second carbon tax. But economists and the government's own number crunchers show that the costs are really going to be felt by all of us when we're fueling up at the pumps. In fact, the government's numbers suggest that the second carbon tax could increase the price of gasoline by up to 13 cents by 2030. And the government's own analysis shows who's really going to feel the pinch the most from the second carbon tax: lower and middle income Canadians who are already struggling with energy poverty, like single mothers and the seniors who are living on fixed incomes.
All right, Mr. Terrazzano, a little over a minute left here, but we're talking a lot about tax increases. What are some instances of tax relief across Canada, federally and provincially, especially when compared to other peer countries?
Well, you've got Alberta that is ending bracket creep. It's also suspending gas taxes. Ontario providing gas tax relief. You got New Brunswick providing significant income tax relief up to $1,300. But we have to also talk about the payroll tax hikes from the federal government. In 2023, if you're making $67,000 or more, you're going to be paying about $300 extra bucks because of the payroll tax hikes, but even that downplays the total bill. In 2023, through the payroll tax, a worker making $67,000 or more will pay about $4,700 in payroll taxes in 2023.
Lots to consider, Mr. Terrazzano. And if anyone wants more information, they can visit the CTF's website. Again, Mr. Terrazzano, we appreciate your time.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Up next, a look at food prices in Canada and what to expect in the new year. Stay tuned.
An average family of four can expect to fork out nearly $16,300 for groceries next year. Now, that would be nearly $1,100 more than this year's average spend. Canada's latest food price report says food inflation is here to stay, at least for the first half of next year. The report predicts that food prices will rise between 5% and 7% next year before easing back. Food bank use in Canada also reached a record high this year and is expected to continue to grow in 2023. Well, joining us now to unpack the report is Ms. Samantha Taylor with the Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University. Ms. Taylor, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thank you again for having me again, Yima.
So what are the main takeaways that Canadians need to know from this report?
For sure. So I wish I was bringing a little bit better news, but right now what we hope that Canadians know is just to be prepared that while they are feeling the crunch with housing, with utilities, and with the economic slowdown, this crunch is likely to continue well into 2023.
Unwelcome news indeed, Ms. Taylor. Now, where will we see these price increases the most in terms of groceries?
Well, unfortunately, it's going to be pretty steady across the board. So we're going to be seeing them in dairy, we're going to be seeing it in meats, we're going to be seeing it in others, so kind of the middle of the store. And we're going to see it the most with vegetables at 6 to 8%.
Making it harder to eat healthier, it seems. Now, what are the main reasons driving these cost increases across the board here?
For sure. So it's going to be similar factors to what we've already seen with our 10.3% food inflation in 2022. So the impacts of the war in Ukraine, the tail end of the COVID-19 impact to the supply chain, high oil prices, continued global tensions, as well as labor shortages.
Now, are these price increases equal across the country, or are prices differing in some regions or provinces?
So they're relatively the same or similar across all provinces, with the exception of Quebec and Newfoundland, because they had uncharacteristically high price increases in 2022. They're unlikely to see the same magnitude of increase because they kind of had a bigger hit, and it's unlikely that those provinces will see the same relative hit year over year. But it's still going to be, towards that 5 to 7%, just perhaps slightly less than the other provinces.
And what about the restaurant industry? How do you expect these price increases to impact that sector?
So we're expecting it to be very similar at 4 to 6%, keeping in mind that restaurant prices have also increased rather significantly in 2022.
All right, Ms. Taylor. Now, in a previous interview, we were speaking about greedflation, which is essentially price gouging by the grocery sector in particular right now. We know there's a parliamentary investigation looking into this, a Competition Bureau study into the grocery store prices. What do you expect from these?
Well, I'm slightly more optimistic than the last time we spoke. In fact, right now, my colleague Sylvain Charlebois is testifying at the House of Commons, the Standing Committee for Agriculture, and really going to be testifying on our report as part of that. And so we're very optimistic because Canadians are being heard, their concerns are being heard at the highest levels. And the Competition Bureau has agreed to look end to end of the supply chain for why prices are going up in the grocery store. As well as I caught on the news a little while back after their Q3 earnings report, Loblaw said that they anticipate inflation to start easing. To me, perhaps that might be them signaling that, hey, we understand our price freeze on our no name is going to wrap up on January 31st. Well, perhaps, they might consider extending it if they are looking optimistically into the future. So, all in all, lots of positive indications. However, these things take time from a parliamentary and competition bureau standpoint. So I'm optimistic, although it won't be immediate.
Good to hear some positive news amid all of this. Now, Ms. Taylor, it looks like we've got about a minute left here, but what can consumers do to adapt to these higher prices? Any tips or guidance that you would have for us?
I teach cost management at Dalhousie, and when we really talk to corporations, we talk about the price you pay as well as the volume or the amounts that you use. So I would say the same advice holds true to consumers. And even further to that, get excited about something that will, save prices at the grocery store. So if you like apps, if you like coupon clipping, if you like shopping the sales, do that. If you want to reduce your food waste, if you want to cook large meals and freeze them, if you want to, be really diligent about reducing food waste by identifying, vegetables or fruit that might be turning, freezing them and locking in those nutrients and reducing your food waste. So my advice is find something that you can get excited about, because those small incremental impacts will have a large impact to your pocketbook.
Some very helpful advice there, Ms. Taylor. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
The economic outlook for 2023 continues to look disappointing as Canada's top banks make moves in preparation for a widely expected economic slowdown next year. This comes as central banks around the world tighten their monetary policies to tame soaring inflation. And banks aren't alone in thinking that the upcoming year might be a difficult one economically. According to a recent Nanos poll of over 1,000 Canadians, 9 in 10 believe there could be a recession in 2023. The survey came following a Royal Bank of Canada report in October predicting a possible recession for the first quarter of next year. On Wednesday, RBC CEO Dave McKay was quoted saying that the bank was bracing for a possible brief and moderate recession. Well, joining us now to give us an idea of what this possible moderate recession could look like for Canadians is Dr. Moshe Lander, professor of economics at Concordia University. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Hello.
Now, the outlook for 2023 continues to look quite concerning, according to recent reports and surveys. So what is your take on all of this, Dr. Lander?
I mean, the economy is going to slow down. Is it going to slow down to a point that we have 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth? I don't know. The comment that you made earlier about that it might be brief and moderate is probably a good one. I think the issue is that when you said 9 in 10 Canadians expect a slowdown, the reality is that if you believe it, you'll make it happen. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think a little optimism is needed here.
Well, that's an interesting point you make, Dr. Lander. Now, in terms of this brief and moderate recession, according to Dave McKay from RBC, is this prediction in line with what other economists are saying?
Yeah, there's the old joke that, economists have correctly predicted 9 of the last 5 recessions. So I'm sure that if you ask enough economists, you'll get a wide range from we're in no danger to we're going to experience strong growth. I think the general consensus is at least that there is a slowdown coming. And again, it's just we're teetering at that 0%. Some are slightly above, saying we can avoid recession. Some are going to say that we're slightly below. But I don't think there's any real disagreement that the economy is much slower now and will be in 2023 than we were at the beginning of 2022.
So what could this economic slowdown look like for Canadians?
Well, if we do experience a slowdown, I don't think it's going to be the stereotype sort of recession that a lot of us have in mind, right? Big job losses and cratering economic activity. The reality is that this past summer, we've been seeing all of these job wanted ads and employers are desperate to find workers. I think the likeliest outcome is they're probably just going to say, you know what, we're going to stop looking for now. And when things get better, we'll start looking again. That means that they'll probably work with the existing labor force that they have now. And so unemployment probably won't go up substantially. And so that would be a real change. And because of that, I think that the amount of economic activity that goes on might slow down a bit. But the fact is, if you have this pool of labor that's still there, you're probably not going to see a lot of cratering economic activity.
And are there any particular sectors of the economy that might be hit harder than other sectors that we should know about?
It's the usual list of suspects, right? So you're probably going to see construction and the housing market see slowdown. Retail sales could find that there's a slowdown going on. Food and beverage sector could get hit again after recovering slightly from COVID. Hospitality and travel and tourism might fall as well. So all of those things that are considered to be the luxury end of the economy might take a hit. But the staples are probably going to continue to roll on, especially with inflation. We've realized focus our energy on making sure that we have our basic needs met, and we'll figure out the rest later.
All right, Dr. Lander. Well, are there any positive economic outlooks for the coming year?
Yes, absolutely. What goes down must go back up. So even if we see that there's a recession, it is probably going to be a 2023 phenomenon only, and we'll recover in 2024. And the Bank of Canada is probably going to stop their interest rate hikes sometime in 2023 as well. I know that that's not necessarily positive news in that interest rates will go down, but at least the pain of how fast and how much they've gone up will stop. And so at least we can kind of figure out how we're going to make our mortgage payments going forward.
All right, Dr. Lander, about a minute left here, but any advice for Canadians in terms of preparing for this upcoming year?
Figure out what's essential and make sure that you're allocating your resources towards those things that are essential, and what's not essential, set it aside, hold on to it. And when you get a better lay of the land, you can decide whether you want to spend on those non-essentials.
Interesting advice there, sir. A quick 45 seconds here, but what are you keeping your eyes on amid all of this geopolitical and economic uncertainty?
Well, one of the things that I said at the beginning there was as long as there's no new surprises. And unfortunately, 2022 has been a world of surprises. And that's after 2 years of more worlds of surprises. So the real issue is then, is 2023 going to look something like pre-pandemic? Or are we going to continue to just see these things that we just didn't even know could happen? If they happen, then all bets are off, and we could be talking about a steep recession. But otherwise, as long as the known unknowns remain the same, we should be good.
Lots to keep our eyes on. Dr. Lander, again, thank you so much for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Anytime.
An expert's advice on prepping this year's investment portfolio up next.
Well, as Canadians prepare for the end of the year, the economic outlook for 2023 does not look promising. And some investment professionals are encouraging people to cross their T's and dot their I's coming into the new year. Now, this comes following yet another interest rate hike by the Bank of Canada earlier this month, one by the U.S. Federal Reserve on Wednesday, and others by the Bank of England and the European Central Bank on Thursday. Meanwhile, investors continue to hope that the bear market will finally come to an end in 2023, although no one has a clear date in mind for when exactly that would happen. Well, joining us now to give us his outlook for 2023 and what investors can do to prepare is Brendan Caldwell, Director at Caldwell Securities Limited. Brendan, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Well, good to be back, Nima, even in these dark times.
Yes, definitely, Brendan. Now, considering we're just over 2 weeks until the end of the year, is there anything that investors should consider regarding their portfolio right now?
Well, with your introduction there, it does make one want to feel like you should run for the hills, but I would encourage people to actually be a lot more thoughtful about it, in that if you genuinely think you're going to need money, like if you have a portfolio of, or you're going to need 100,000 or a million or whatever the number is, even 10, whatever money you think you're going to need in 2023, then yeah, it may make some sense to set that money aside now so that you're not worried about the ups and downs of the market in the short term. But this pervasive negativity, the concern about interest rates going up, about inflation, about a recession, all of that has got the market somewhat negative. It's down today, but I think it's largely been absorbed into the market consciousness. So short of some other external shock hitting the market that we don't expect, I actually think that 2023 could be a very good year, surprisingly.
Some interesting points to consider, Brendan. Now, in addition to these interest rate hikes, we know a lot of people are thinking about inflation, the rising cost of living. So what would be the best way to hedge against inflation, especially coming into the new year?
Well, that's a tough one, Nima, because it's affecting everybody in all different levels, from food prices, no matter what the CEO of Loblaws might say, to rents, to really almost every expense in life. But from a portfolio perspective, there are really two types of investments: ones that have fixed incomes and ones that have the ability to increase the revenue that they generate to the portfolio. And those latter tend to be in the form of dividend paying stocks. So my client's emphasis for the next while, and indeed for the last while, has been to own stocks that have the capacity to both grow their earnings and the distributions of dividends that they pay out to their shareholders. So companies with rising dividends are probably the best bet to combat over a longer period of time inflation if it's indeed here to stay.
All right, Brendan, I want to switch gears and talk about RRSP accounts now. We know a new year means new 2023 birthdays, and once you turn 71, you must change your RRSP account into an RRIF account. So tell us a little bit more about these accounts and what seniors need to consider when it comes to RRIF accounts.
Well, there's lots of different vehicles which to save. So younger people, the first vehicle they should likely use is a tax-free savings account, a TFSA, because there's no deduction to put the money in, but all the money in it accumulates tax-free, and then there's no tax to take it out. Fine. But the RSP, useful for once you've maxed out your TFSA for saving, say for a house, and ultimately for retirement. These RSPs have to, when you get it up into your 70s, be turned into an account where the money is paid out on a regular basis, because the government, having allowed you to make a tax deduction putting money into your RSP, wants its taxes eventually. So yes, the year you turn 71, your RSP needs to be turned into a RIF, a Registered Retirement Income Fund. And then starting the age of 72, that begins to pay out. My advice to people is to try and minimize the amount taken out of your RIF. You can either use your age or your spouse's age as the basis for taking money out, because as you get older, you need to take a higher percentage out. I suggest using the younger of the two. And unless you actually need the money for income, to take it out toward the end of the year, to give it the maximum time to continue to accumulate, because the money can still grow in these RIFs even after you're retired and grow on a tax deferred basis.
Always a helpful interview, Brendan. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you, Nima.
I'm Nathaniel Duick, and from all of us here at Forum Daily, Happy New Year. See you next time.